I'm selling it. We get a total net investment in this car of, I sold this car for, so that makes me a profit of man. Told you guys we're gonna want to wait to see it in the sun.
Hey, all work, no pleasure. I ain't here to make friends, big stepper. Hey, bad guy, Heath Ledger. Ready for wherever, I'll be front and center. Don't fly too close to the sun, your body chopped up by propellers. Came in arrogant, but left out in a stretcher. The comparison, y'all know y'all couldn't replicate it. Chilling in the desert, I'm good under pressure. Stick around when we hold it down, look at what we found. This a marathon, not a sprint, let's go 100 miles. From the ground, when we to the clouds, never coming down. That's the crown on me, wear it proud, show them what we bout. Stick around when we hold it down, look at what we found. Said this a marathon, not a sprint, let's go 100 miles. From the ground, when we to the clouds, never coming down.
This Prius just pooped himself, seeing me come up in the rear view like that. Ladies and gentlemen, or the two ladies that maybe watch this channel, gentlemen, welcome to what is the final episode of my cheap 2003 Cobra that just needed a clutch. Almost 1 year to the date of me buying this thing last year. This thing is finally 100% done. Mechanically solid, cosmetically absolutely beautiful, drives beautifully. I would drive this thing anywhere. Been driving it all summer. It's ready to go. Whiteboard's empty. There's nothing left to do on this thing. So what's next? Well, I'm selling it. Just needed a clutch. Happy Friday, guys. Unfortunately, you heard me right. I am selling my 2003 Sonic Blue Cobra. This project is just so much more than I think any of us would have ever expected. It has been over a year since I purchased this car. The original intent was to buy it, put a clutch in it, clean it up a little bit, and flip it. And it just snowballed, whether I liked it or not. Man, what a project it has been. This is video number 25. I just looked up all these analytics on YouTube. 1.5 million views on this series, 25 videos. I think 15,000 of you subscribed because of this car, which for a small channel like mine is huge, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And we've been through it all together, ups and downs, mostly downs, unfortunately, but it has all been worth it. This thing came out so good, and I could not be happier with the end product here. So before we get into why I'm selling the car, and most importantly, what I'm interested in and what you guys are probably interested in too, how much do I have invested in this thing? Am I even gonna make any money? How much money am I gonna lose? You'll have to wait and find out. how did we get here? I think a 25 video series deserves a quick recap as to how we got here. And even though I technically bought the car 1 year ago, basically today, I think it was October 15th of 2023, I bought the car. I saw it long before that. This car was posted in one of the 03 Cobra Facebook groups needing a clutch for 16.5, I think. And the guy said his inbox exploded and a ton of people had messaged him, but no one had come to look at the car. So in August of 2023, I was heading to my cousin's wedding down in Pennsylvania, kind of on the way to New Jersey, like 6 hours away. So I hooked up the trailer to my Super Duty, drove all the way to Pennsylvania, went to my cousin's wedding, and then after that, we kind of looped up through New Jersey with cash in hand to buy this car for around 16 grand. I figured it would be a good deal. I looked at it and ended up driving away. The car needed so much, as you guys saw. It was leaking oil from everywhere underneath. It obviously needed a clutch. It wouldn't even move. The carpet and interior the carpet had holes in it. There was holes in the floor. The interior was disgusting. Steering wheel was gross. The body was beat up and dirty. The brakes were shot. The tires were shot. The wheels were shot. It just needed everything. And I remember I got back into the truck and said to my wife, she was like, "Are you buying it?" And I was like, "No, it needs everything." And at the time I had a lot going on with my house and work and stuff. So I passed and kind of forgot about it. So fast forward 2 months. So now we're into October of 2023. I've caught up on some house stuff. I was traveling for work. I was down at the airport bar in, I think, Orlando, waiting for a flight. Had a couple sodas and was feeling confident. So I was like, hey, I wonder if that guy still has that Cobra now that I might have time for a big project like that. I texted him. I said, "You still got it?" And he said, "Yep." So had one more sip of beer and then shot him my lowball, what I thought was a lowball offer at the time. Offer of 13 grand, I think. And he said, "Will you do 14?" And we ended up meeting in the middle at 13.5. I said, "Great, I'll be there this weekend with a truck and trailer." And that is where this all starts. So let's see how we got here. So we had a deal made on the Cobra. So I backed up the truck, hooked up the trailer, grabbed some cash, and headed down to the armpit of America, aka New Jersey. Encountered plenty of traffic, got on my nerves just a little bit. Got there, realized the car was just as much of a piece of junk as I remembered from when I looked at it in August, so I loaded it up as quickly as I could in the rain and got headed on my way back through the other armpit of America, New York City. Eventually got the car home back to New Hampshire and kind of went around and looked at the piece of crap that I had just bought, including the holes in the floor, carpet on fire, oil leaks from everywhere, disgusting engine bay. Got right to work, got a battery for it, put the battery in, and we gave this thing its first start. The motor sounded halfway decent, but a couple of you, and myself included, even noticed a little bit of a gallop during the initial start, which will come to haunt us a little bit later. The car would barely stay running. Clutch barely moved the car. Just overall in pretty rough shape. Eventually I was able to limp it into the garage for what I thought would be a relatively easy clutch job, but we all know where that was going. Pretty immediately found that one of the cylinders had basically no compression, at which point I realized this was about to be a much bigger project than I thought. I wasn't sure if it was a problem with the heads or a problem with the lower end, but either way, at that point I knew the motor needed to come out, so I got right to work doing just that, pulling the original motor out of the car. First time dropping a motor out of the bottom, not so bad. Then got right to work tearing down the original motor to see what might have gone wrong, all the way down to the block. And there was very little usable parts. There was a piston that was completely melted, the ring land was completely gone, almost every rod bearing was shot. I can't believe the car even ran. It did some damage to the crank. So I immediately started looking around, found a screaming deal on a forged Texid long block. The motor had some great parts, forged diamond pistons, forged rods, ARP hardware, the factory forged Cobra crank. Found some 9-thread rebuilt C-heads locally, and slapped those on with some brand new Felpro multi-layer steel head gaskets and new bolts. Decided to paint the valve covers Sonic Blue while the motor was out. Painted every single other engine part after exhaustive hours of degreasing and cleaning. Brand new Ford Racing timing components. Got everything timed up. Rebuilt the oil cooler. Got some Powered by SVT coil covers and custom painted those, along with many hours of painting and cleaning, and we had ourselves a pretty darn good looking 0304 Cobra complete motor. After that, I turned my attention to the transmission and bell housing, which, like everything else, were covered in grease and oil. Many of you pointed out the crack in the bell housing, so I got that cleaned up and welded up. Installed a brand new McLeod RST clutch and all associated parts, including a new fork, flywheel, transmission output shaft seal, new tick shifter, and got that mated to the motor. Once everything was mated together, it was pretty much ready to drop into the car, or I guess drop the car on the motor. And then came the many hours of reassembling all the accessories and belts and fluids and everything else, and eventually we were ready for our first start. Which went pretty well until we popped a follower off of the cam.
That's not good.
Got the valve cover off, found the follower. Didn't look like it did any damage, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Got a follower and lifter from one of the spare heads that I had, popped that back in, started the car again, and everything sounded really good. After that, I replaced the pinion seal as well as resealed the differential housing and gave the B&M cover that was on there a nice coat of paint. And then we could finally take this thing for its first drive. New clutch, new motor, everything.
Yeah, there's a technique to driving a face-bladed transmission. I don't have it yet, so we'll have to get into that once we get this thing really out on the road.
After that, I got to work fabricating a custom exhaust. The car came with a set of Mac long tube headers, but I fabricated an X-pipe and grabbed a stainless steel catback off of eBay designed for a solid rear axle because that's what the car came with. Got everything welded together, bolted up. Fitment was really good. I was really happy with how this came out and also how it sounded. While the car was in the air, I decided to tackle the holes in the floors that were caused by someone that tried to weld in hangers. So I welded up the holes, grinded them down, seam sealed them, and then primed them just like the factory would have. And then we got to see how my new exhaust sounded. Notice all of the oil smoke. Some of that is just because it was cold out, but a lot of it was oil. With the exhaust on, it was time to really start driving the car and putting some miles on it. Hey, at least it sounded good. With the mechanicals seeming to be looking on the up and up, I decided to get to work on the interior, including the smoked seats, destroyed steering wheel, cut up and burned carpet. So I blasted the entire interior apart, installed a mint condition OEM carpet out of a low mileage Mach 1, installed an oil pressure gauge from the missing spot in the pod, put a brand new Redline Goods steering wheel in the car with matching shift boot. Spent a lot of time cleaning up the suede and leather seats, including removing all the pilling, conditioning the leather, and even repairing and re-dyeing the driver's side bolster. Fully steam cleaned, disinfected, wiped down, and just overall detailed the interior. Put everything back together and had a pretty darn good finished product. After that, I decided to replace the factory heat exchanger with one from eBay, which was a great deal. Mounted up some custom brackets, got that thing in there. Finally replaced the headlights, which I was really excited about. These are 0304 Cobra specific, which really transformed the front end. Then decided to work on the terrible ESR wheels that were on the car. I went with a tried and true combo, the 18-inch Sullivan chrome wheels, got some new front tires, and swapped on the old Toyo TQ drag radials. But I couldn't bolt those on without doing something about the rusty rotors and poorly painted calipers, so got brand new brakes, painted the rotors and brackets, really cleaned up everything in the front suspension and rear suspension. And then we were able to bolt up those beautiful 18-inch Sullivans and new tires with fresh chrome lugs. Looking sharp. After that, I decided to tackle the really only issue with the body on the car, which is a bunch of scratches on the rear quarter that went into the rear bumper. They couldn't be buffed, they were too deep. So I took it down to the body shop to my buddy Ben, and we both worked together to fix the scratches, which was pretty easy since it was just basically down to the base coat. So did some blending, some clear coating, got the quarter panel and bumper painted. They came out absolutely mint, and then got everything back on the car. After that, I figured I was ready for the dyno, so I did the car's first oil change, added some additional conventional motor oil to continue the break-in process, loaded the car on the trailer, and headed down to Turbo Mike in Charlton, Massachusetts for a dyno tune. Got the car up on the dyno, and unfortunately the car was smoking a lot. We originally figured that this was mostly during deceleration, so we kind of attributed it to a potential valve seal or valve guide issue. I knew that the car had absolutely zero blow-by, which would indicate that it's likely not a piston ring issue. And I also did a compression test and found that it had 200 psi in every cylinder. But either way, if it was a valve guide, the motor needed to come out yet again, so I started the long process of pulling the motor for a second time. Dropped it out the bottom, just like the first time, and got to work replacing all 32 valve seals. Didn't get very far though before I found what came to bite us in the butt, which was the rocker or follower that had fallen off, ended up bending a valve and cracking a valve guide, which of course means that the entire head had to come off, including all associated accessories, timing components, header, everything. Dropped that off at the machine shop, and in the meantime, painstakingly replaced all the remaining valve seals and threw in some coilovers while the motor was out, while you're in there. Got the repaired head back, finished up all the rest of the valve seals, bought head gaskets again, and head bolts again. Got the head bolted back on, everything torqued down to spec, completely retimed the motor, and then of course went ahead and put on all of the accessories and belts and everything else. Dropped the supercharger assembly back on, pushed the motor under the car, getting sick of this guys, and dropped the car back on the motor. And it's not even the last time I'm gonna do this. What an idiot. Then took care of the remaining things like fluids and exhaust to get the car into our first start, I guess.
Oil pressure.
Which once again seemed to go well. Great oil pressure, motor sounded good, sounded healthy, no issues. Even though it seemed to smoke a little bit, it seemed like it was better. So I said, screw it, I'm putting all this money and time into this car. I'm just gonna start driving it and enjoy it. And maybe the rings will seat a little bit better and things will be good. So I probably put 600 miles on the car over the course of early in the summer. Took it everywhere. It did sound good. I scheduled another dyno appointment, and I figured before I wasted the time to drive down there and the tuner's time and the money, I should check to make sure that the car was not smoking under acceleration or deceleration as it was back the first time on the dyno. So I set up my tripod in this exact video that you see right here, and the video kind of tells the story. Yep, still smoking pretty heavily under acceleration and deceleration actually. So I got back from taking this video and didn't really know what to do. The car kind of went away from the channel for like 2 or 3 months while I figured out what to do, which of course led to me going on eBay and seeing what was for sale, and I ended up finding a screaming deal on a complete 03 Cobra motor in Kentucky for like $5 grand. So of course I bought that and got it shipped to the freight terminal in New Hampshire. Picked it up, loaded it in the truck, and got ready to start working on that in the garage. The deal on this motor was so good that I didn't really care if it was good or not. I figured I would pull the other motor out and send it to a machine shop to figure out what was wrong with it. And then in the meantime, we could mess with this thing as a gamble and, you know, we might get lucky. And as I come to find out, we would finally get lucky. But either way, pushed it into the garage, checked out the motor, which had some really nice parts, forged crank, forged rods, ARP hardware. It clearly had a fresh hone, forged pistons, and it looked good enough for me, so I decided to pull out the other motor again. What is this, time number 3 now? And then start the painstaking process of taking all my nice parts and transferring them over to this basically unknown long block. The clutch, the exhaust, you know, all the drive accessories, the T56 Magnum. I ended up using the supercharger off of the motor from Kentucky because, as I found, the other supercharger was full of oil from whatever's wrong with that motor. So we eliminated that as a variable as well and got the motor number 3, as we're calling it, ready to go back in the car for what is under my ownership the last time. And once again, God, I sound like a broken record. Put all of the accessories and damn fluids in the car. And what do you know? First start number 3, I think. Somehow this cheap motor from a guy that had no receipts or anything sounded really good.
Whisper quiet.
Got it all back together and immediately started hammering miles on the car. After about 100 miles, I decided to do the same test as before, and before we hit the dyno, make sure that we weren't smoking or having any issues, and for once, things worked out. No smoke at all. So, feeling confident and feeling good, I once again loaded up the car, headed down to Turbo Mike, and we got the car on the dyno again, and this time it was much, much better. No smoke at all, and the car seemed to be running really good, stayed cool, did exactly what it was supposed to do, but unfortunately we did run into an issue where at wide open throttle, quick stab of the throttle, the car would fall on its face and kind of hiccup. We tried everything on the dyno, multiple different tunes. I tried pulling out the Kenny Bell boost pump, and ultimately we couldn't figure it out. It looked like fuel pressure was dropping, but we weren't really sure. Even though I was kind of disappointed, you know, deep down I was really, really happy that I knew the motor was healthy, that this was something hopefully simple that we could fix and I'd be back on the road. So I was happy. Still unfortunate I had to go all the way down to the dyno, but it is what it is. So got the car home, started going through data logs, started trying a bunch of different things. Since I had all these extra parts, I tried everything. I swapped coils, I swapped MAF airflow sensors from the Lightning, which it turns out is the same part number. Put in a new fuel rail pressure sensor, thinking maybe it was the fuel pumps. I dropped the tank and checked out the fuel pumps, but they sounded totally fine and looked totally fine. So before I went down the rabbit hole of a Cobra fuel system, I said, screw it, I'm gonna put the fuel tank back up. I swear I remember this car running right when it was on the original tune, and I just had a gut feeling that it was something to do with the tune. So I put some fresh 93 in the car, loaded the tune from the original owner, which was a very identical setup, directly from the SVT X4, and what do you know, the car absolutely ran perfect.
All right, here we go, guys. Just gonna roll into it in second gear. No way. No way. Is that all it was?
Checked out the data log afterwards, and everything looked good. Fuel pump duty cycle seemed like it was where it should be. And after a little bit of time and research, and in the interest of saving time, I decided to go with a remote tuner. He's a well-known remote tuner in the Cobra space, Kevin Dunn, just so I wouldn't have to go back to the dyno. And he tunes through SVT, so I knew we wouldn't have any issues. So he sent me a base tune. We went through some revisions, got that flashed onto the car, and before you know it, we were doing pulls and data logs that I could send to him, and then he could send back an updated or revised tune. During the tuning process, the car shredded a belt, which I thought was kind of weird since it probably didn't have more than 1,000 miles on it. And I ended up shredding a couple before I realized I had mistakenly installed the lower pulley incorrectly, which was causing the belts to shred. So got that squared away, then had some troubles with a belt that would not stop squeaking. I thought it was idlers, and ended up being the belt itself. Got pretty frustrated, considered pushing the car into the Atlantic Ocean, but eventually realized that it was just the belt, so I put another brand new belt on the car, and after a couple tune revisions with Kevin, it finally ran perfect and we did a full pull to 6,000 RPM. After that, the car was finally running really well. A couple more revisions with the tuner, and then I finally got to take the car out and bang some gears after almost a year of work. The car was running perfect and it absolutely ripped. So at that point I was pretty happy with where the car was mechanically, so I decided to finally get into what I'd been waiting forever to get into, which was a full paint correction and detail of the car. Washed it, clay barred it, endless hours of polishing and compounding and buffing, and then sealed it all up with G-Technic ceramic coating products. And man, was it worth it. Completely transformed the exterior of this car. Okay, welcome back. So now you're all caught up. You know exactly how we got here. 25 videos worth of content packed into a few minute summary of a year's worth of work on this car, on and off between other projects. But I know a bunch of you are saying, I can't believe you're selling the car. You put in all that, you know, time, effort, money, blood, sweat, tears. Why are you selling it as soon as it's done? And I got a couple good answers. The first one is, and the simplest one is, this car was always intended to be a flip. And I never knew that it was gonna need basically 2 motors and everything that it needed. I never knew that I'd want to perfect it to this state, which makes it harder to flip. Not only from a monetary standpoint, but the amount of hours I have invested in it. But a viewer of the channel, one of you reached out. I actually just had to look this up. I knew it was early when I got this car, but it turns out it was like literally a week after I got this car. I think it was October 25th. I got a message on Instagram that said, hey, just wanted to touch base. I'm interested in buying the car whenever it's done. I've seen your work. I know that your cars are nice when you're done with them. I'm not looking to pay, you know, the 40, 45 grand for a top, you know, top of the line, low mileage Terminator. So let me know if you think that, you know, this is something we could work out when you're done with it. So I messaged him back, and another thing to note is he made an Instagram just for this car, just because that was how he was going to contact me. It was made an Instagram account just to contact me. I think he's actually since deleted it, but I was like, yeah, sure. No problem. I'll let you know when it's done. It should be a month or so. I just gotta put a clutch in it. So, you know, and I didn't have high hopes at the time. The amount of messages I get on Instagram and YouTube and everything saying, how much will you sell it? I'll buy it. I'm a buyer. And like 1% of those people are actually serious, and 0.1% of those people actually have cash or money in their bank account to buy any of this stuff. So I kind of took it with a grain of salt and was like, yeah, whatever. We'll see if this guy is serious or not. But he was very serious. he followed up, every other week. Hey man, how's it going? And he wasn't pushy. He was just kind of, hey, just checking in, wanted to let you know that I'm serious. He was persistent throughout this whole process. When he found out it needed a motor, no problem. Let me know when you get that sorted out. When we found out it needed, there was an issue on the dyno and it needed a valve seal, or so we thought, no problem. When I found out I was going to put a third motor in it, okay, no problem. When we were having tuning issues, through all of this in a year, I was just saying, a few more weeks, and he was totally cool with it. He basically just said, whenever you're done with it, just let me know. So last week, when I finished the paint correction and this thing, in my opinion, was 100% done, I texted him a picture and said, what do you think? You want to do this or not? And he said, yep, I'll wire you the money. So this car is sold to a viewer of the channel, and he is over the moon about it, and he should be. It really is a beautiful car. So that's the biggest reason, is I'm a man of my word, and I told this guy a year ago that I would sell him the car when it was done. So even though I went through a lot with it, it would not be the right thing to do to make this guy wait a year and then go back on my word and say, I'm actually gonna keep it. He could have missed out on other deals. He could have bought another car. He missed the whole summer this year of cruising out where he's from, because I was trying to finish this thing up. So it wouldn't be right. So that's the big reason. The second one, or second or third, I don't remember which one I'm on at this point, is I don't have room for all these cars. I got 2 or 3 cars sitting outside. I think I've put 200 or 150 miles on my Camaro this summer. The black Z06 has not been on the channel for I think a year and has maybe 10 miles on it this summer. We've got to fix the Mercedes, the Lightning. I still have a bunch of stuff I want to do. I mean, I'm drowning. I'm drowning in awesome vehicles, and it's a first world problem, but there's plenty of YouTube channels out there where they buy a new car every other week, and fix a couple things on it, beat the crap out of it for a video, and then it gets dumped in their yard, and 6 months later they might go try and fix it up again. I'm not that guy. I'm not that channel. I will never be that channel. I like my stuff to stay nice, to be nice and to stay nice. And in order for this car to stay nice, it really needs to be in a garage. And if I'm done with it right now, it would end up outside while other projects, take over. So in all reality, if someday I can get myself a bigger shop or garage and I can have 12 cars at once and keep them all inside, great. But until then, I'm kind of at my limit here, and I'd like to buy new cars to keep stuff coming on the channel for you guys, and we're out of room. So those are the big reasons why I'm selling the car. Some of you might disagree with it, but hey, my cars, right? I can do what I want with them. So we covered how we got here. We covered why I'm selling the car. Let's get into the finances of this thing. So those of you guys who have been around the channel a little while and have followed I think the red Z06, I did this. I think the CTSV, I did this. The yellow Cobra last year, I didn't do this because that was a really simple project. It needed like $1,000 worth of parts. But this thing, I've got like 3 spreadsheets with sub spreadsheets inside of them to try and figure out what's going on. So you guys are gonna have to bear with me, but we're gonna go through this down to the dollar, how much money I have invested in this thing, and see if I come out on top or not. Okay, so if we go back last year to the 03 Cobra, and I've said this in previous videos to you guys, I keep track of the finances on almost every car I purchase. I did a video on this for my Camaro actually too. Not only because it's just good to know, but I mean, especially on a car that you intend to maybe turn for a profit someday, how are you gonna know how much money you made or how much money you lose, hopefully not, if you don't keep track of how much money you put into it? Trust me, it's easy to let things snowball and little stuff adds up and you could be upside down before you know it. But I just use Excel and keep track of my parts as I order them. And it's always worked well for me. If I go back here to previous tabs, I've been doing this since 2016. I've been keeping track of my finances in cars, and long before my YouTube channel. So I'm gonna go through this. Some of this stuff, let's say for example, I ordered a clutch, and then on the same day I ordered, a serpentine belt. I put them on one line just so I don't have 100 lines of things we have to go through. I just put them together with the total there. So some of this stuff is kind of out of order, but I can assure you all of it to the dollar is correct, because I literally, as soon as I order something, I always jump right over to this spreadsheet and make sure that it's up to date. So let's get into it. 03 Cobra. So the first day I tore into this car, when I was buying the car, the guy literally had to take the battery out of his daily driver and put in this thing to jump it for me, which should have been a sign of how poorly it was cared for before this guy robbed the battery out of it. But first thing I purchased, went to Walmart and bought a battery, an oil, and filter, because I was like, oh, I'll probably do an oil change, not knowing that the motor was basically junk. So the battery, oil, and filter, $180. Then we start getting into, some of the actual motor builds. Gates green belt, which we recently shredded, actually. New spark plugs and OEM exhaust gaskets were $70. The carpet that had holes in it, I was able to source a super clean, like mint, low mile carpet out of a Mach 1 charcoal carpet, just as this would have come from the factory, for $141. So glad I went with factory carpet because it's got all the indents. It literally slid right in, perfect. SVT coil covers, UPR head cooling mod, and the coolant reservoir that had a scratch in it for the past 10 months. That was $192. The steering wheel I had custom stitched from Redline Goods. That was $460. The radiator cover, the OEM Ford radiator cover, $63. The rear trunk liners, I bought from a guy up in Maine that was parting out a V6. Those are those fabric pieces that go on the inside of the trunk. Those were $30. Wheels and tires, so the Sullivan 18-inch reps, 18x10 in the rear, 18x9 in the front, and then the new tires on the front. The rear tires were the Toyos that were basically brand new when I bought the car. So I have, $1,144 in those. Had that big LMR order, so this was a lot of the stuff for the driveline. I got the RST clutch, flywheel, I got the oil cooler rebuild kit, these nice headlights, and those beautiful Cobra floor mats. So that was $1,374 for that. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, so you guys are gonna have to bear with me on this. But as you know, I've put basically two engines in this car. The first one we bought was the built short block, and then I put the 9-thread heads on it and kind of pieced it together from there. So that's this motor right here. Engine number 3, which is in the car, I bought complete from Eaton to Oil Pan from Kentucky. And that's the motor that's in the car. So I recently, just today, modified the spreadsheet for the value I have, or the number that I have invested in this car with engine number 3, because that's the engine that's in the car. So for the engine in here, I paid $4,600, and it cost me $305 to ship it from Kentucky to the freight terminal in New Hampshire that I got it at. So total invested in this engine is $4,905. But this thing came fully dressed. So I have since sold some parts to recoup some of that. Wire harness, $145, the power steering pump, $50, power steering reservoir, $95, and some of the EGR components, $100, for a total of $390. Bringing my invested number into this motor to $4,515. So that is now back on the original cost sheet here, which I'll put up on the screen, so hopefully you guys can see what I'm talking about. And before you guys freak out, I know what you're saying. Well, why are you not including the cost of this motor? Well, this motor I have $4,402 invested in. Everything you see right here. The short block was $2,200. The 9-thread heads that I bought locally were $1,400. The Ford Racing Performance timing kit was $550. Head bolts were $74. Head gaskets were $120. The machine shop work that I had to do to get that new valve seat was $58. And the Cobra Engineering dowel pin plates that are kind of behind the timing cover here were $100. That's a total of $4,402. This motor, in good running condition, with the Eaton and all the pulleys and bridges and basically a fully complete Terminator motor, is worth around 10 grand in good running condition. So the way I see it right now, I can send this to a machine shop, figure out why it's burning oil, and it could be as simple as a hone and a re-ring. Maybe there's something done incorrectly there. I'm not sure yet, but the point is here, I'm going to make money on this motor. Just the accessories, so the Eaton and the timing cover and the valve covers and the lower intake and the intercooler and all of these 03 Cobra or 034 Cobra specific parts I've added up here. I'll put it up on the screen because I did this before I even bought this motor, are worth over 5 grand. So just in the accessories, if I parted out just the accessories, not the custom, very expensive gas-ported forged diamond pistons that are in this thing, not the Molnar power adder rods with ARP hardware, not the very expensive Cobra forged crank, not the Texan block, considering none of that, there's more money in parts here, just in accessories, than I paid for the whole motor. Point being, I'm going to make money on this motor one way or another. So I didn't think that it was right to include it as a loss or, you know, parts cost for this car, because I'm going to make money on it, but I also don't think it's right to include potential profit in this thing right now. So we're putting this to the side. You guys will see this again on the channel. I got unlucky with the car, but I got very lucky with parts. I got a screaming deal on the parts for this motor. I got a screaming deal on this complete motor from Kentucky. I have less than 10 grand invested in two motors that are worth closer to 20. So that's how that worked out for me. I guess maybe making up for all the bad luck with everything else. So that was a lot. I'm really trying not to ramble right now, but I'm really just trying to make you guys get in my head and see how this makes sense to me. So that's the worst of it. That's the hardest part to understand. So now we're back on track. Now we got the engine in there. Next thing is the eBay catback. And then I bought myself an X-pipe kit and some stainless steel V-band clamps and made myself the custom exhaust for that thing. Or this thing, it was $383 for that stuff. I placed a big Rock Auto order shortly after I knew I was going to rebuild the car. This thing has all new idlers, every single gasket in the motor, seals, you know, throw up bearing, like everything. That was $532. Flywheel bolts and the adjustable pivot ball stud that was required for the T56 Magnum was $59. That custom heat exchanger I put in here was $99. I put that oil pressure gauge in the triple pod pillar there. That was $52. Brand new brake rotors and pads, front and rear. That was from Rock Auto. That was $220. I got that leather die to fix the driver's seat. The Cobra emblem up here that was taped on for the longest time. And the chrome lugs for the wheels. That's $65. This kills me, but it is what it is. And again, this is just what it costs. I had to pay for a dyno tune for this car basically 3 times. The first time was with the motor that was burning oil, so that was $450. The second time was with motor number 3 here, but it was having that wide open throttle issue that actually ended up being an issue with horsepower tuners. That was $500. So dyno tuning, we have $950 invested in this thing. It sucks, but it is what it is. I had to put a new wideband sensor in the car, a new PCV valve, and I put a new thermostat in it the second time. I put the 180-degree thermostat in it the second time I dropped the motor. That was $48 for all that stuff. The driver's side O2 sensor went bad at one point. That was $49 from, I think, Advance Auto down the street. The remote tune that finally got this car running 100% perfect was an additional $400. The belt that we shredded last week or the week before, and I had to put on the Gates belt, that was $34. And that's it. I added just here miscellaneous stuff that maybe I forgot, or fluids, you know, we'll call it shop supplies. I just added it because I know there's probably a couple things that I missed. Like I said, if you can't already tell, I try to be very thorough with this, but just in case I missed something, miscellaneous stuff, $200. So all of that brings us to a grand total of parts purchased for this car of $11,260, but we're not done yet. You guys know I'm big on selling stuff and recouping money. And a lot of times it's not even about recouping the money. I just find it interesting and a challenge to see how little I can be into a car and not cheaping out on parts. You guys know this car has very expensive parts in it. But if you can just get good deals on stuff and sell stuff that you don't need anymore to recoup a little bit, it can be beneficial. And that's right here. So parts that I sold, right off the bat, the first one is turbos. When I bought the car, I asked the kid, I said, do you have any extra parts that can go with the car that you may have collected? And he said, no, but I have 2 VW turbos that you can have. Okay, throw them in the trunk. So 2 random VW turbos. I looked up the part number, posted them on Facebook. Some local kid came and bought them, $160. The SVT rods out of the original motor, I think there was like 3 or 4, maybe 5 good ones. Sold those on eBay, $300. The forged Kellogg crank out of the original motor was in great shape, but did have some minor scarring on one of the journals. It was probably ended up being polished or turned down and reused. I sold that for $440. The original block out of this car, $250. The original 4-thread heads that had some damage, not really worth that much, $250, sold those locally. Spare change, when I did the interior on this thing, I found $2.92 under the carpet. Under the driver's seat is where I found that. So I added that in. The black wheels and tires that were on this car when I bought it, those terrible, I don't even remember what brand they were at this point. Sold those locally to some kid, probably put on his clapped out Honda Accord for $500. The heat exchanger brackets. This is a great example of how expensive a lot of these this Terminator specific parts are. The heat exchanger brackets that I took out because I made my own for this big one, sold for $200 just for the brackets. This, stupid smoked headlights this thing came with, sold those locally for $50. The SLP mufflers that were on this thing and the hacked together H-pipe, some kid came and bought those for $120. Some of the factory suspension, like the Bilstein stuff, the Viking shocks that this thing came with in the rear, sold that stuff for $300. Factory heat exchanger, $68 after shipping on eBay. And the factory SVT coil covers I sold for $50. So that total is $2,790.92. So if we subtract that number from our parts number of $11,260, we get a total net investment in this car of $21,969.51. You guys still with me? Anyone asleep? Not watching anymore? I know. It's math stuff, finance. Some interesting to some, maybe not so much others, but I find this stuff so interesting. $21,969.51 is what I have in this car. So, did I make any money? Yes, I did. I sold this car to the viewer of the channel for $28,500. And I know a bunch of you are gonna be like, my uncle's buddy's friend paid 12 grand for this thing back, a couple of years ago. Yeah, me too, buddy. My red Terminator that had like 38,000 miles and was mint, factory original car, I think I bought for $17,500 back in 2012. So yes, everyone's got a war story about a cheap Terminator that they got back in the day, but those days are long gone. This is a clean title Sonic Blue coupe with an immaculate body, a very clean interior, a brand new motor with literally everything has been gone through on this thing. Brand new brakes, brand new suspension. The interior is phenomenal. New wheels, new tires, just, anything that it needed paint-wise, full paint correction, ceramic coat. Like, you guys know, you watch the series. I've been through this thing front to back, top to bottom, inside and out. I've put my hands on it. It's as nice as we can possibly make it. Yeah, the Sonic Blue coupes just bring good money, and for good reason. It's a great color. And finding a car that's been sorted front to back, I think is worth it. I mean, you could buy a Sonic Blue coupe that hasn't had anything done to it for mid to high 20s, and you have no idea the condition of the motor. This one, we know it's a brand new motor that has 250 miles on it. It runs absolutely perfect. Everything else has been gone through. So that makes me a profit of $6,530.49. Quick interruption, I just realized that I forgot to include, I used to be on the spreadsheet, but for whatever reason it got deleted, the paint work. So painting the quarter panel and the rear bumper, did that with my buddy Ben, $600. So we'll subtract $600 from the total profit, and that will be the final number. Which in theory sounds great, but I mean, I didn't keep track of hours on this car, but it's gotta be in the hundreds of hours into this thing. So if we broke it down, who knows what that hourly rate is, but it's probably not worth it. But to me, it is about more than the money, especially at this point with this thing. When I bought this car, there was a bunch of you that commented after we found out it had low compression, you should part it out. You should get rid of that thing. Just, cut your losses and get rid of it. And a lot of, sane people probably would have done that. I had that thought after I realized the second motor needed work. I remember being outside, kind of aimlessly driving my lawnmower around and thinking, man, I should just get rid of this thing. But I wouldn't quit And you know, I needed to see this car back on the road. There's so many people out there that take these cars and part them out, and for good reason. There's a ton of value in all of these Terminator parts. There's guys that make a living parting these cars out, and it's good for both. It's good that we have people to do that so we can get parts to restore the ones we want, but I think this car deserved to be back on the road, and you know, I'm glad that I was able to do that. It took a lot of fighting and a lot of money and a lot of time, but we're there. We have a beautiful Sonic Blue coupe back on the road. It looks awesome, it sounds awesome, and it's ready to roll. If I did not have a YouTube channel, I don't know if I would have bought this car. Like I said, it needed everything, and if I was not in this position where I have this channel, to be 20, you know, call it 22 grand into this thing, but it took a year and, you know, hundreds of hours of work, I would have rather just spend 25 for one that, you know, ran pretty decent, and then I could have enjoyed it for the last year. So if you're looking for a cheap Terminator, you know, just be wary and learn from my video series, or cheap any car. Usually a cheap Mercedes, cheap Cobra, cheap Corvette is usually an expensive one in the long run. So if you're like me, you like a project, you like a challenge, you like a gamble sometimes, go for it. You can get it for cheap and sometimes get it running cheap, especially if you hunt around for parts. But if you want to get in something and just drive it, you know, just spend a little more money, you know, get the car checked out and save yourself the headache, because otherwise you could end up, you know, working on a car for a year. All that being said, I don't have any regrets. Like I said, the channel has grown because of this car. I got to save a Terminator that a lot of people probably would have parted out or just, you know, sold as a roller. Maybe LS swapped it, Coyote swapped it. But I was able to stay true to this car's roots, which I have so much attachment to. And I think it's going to make the next owner very happy. And I've done everything in my power to make sure it's going to be reliable for another 100,000 miles. Don't be sad. This is not the last Terminator you will see on this channel. If I find a good deal tomorrow, I'm gonna go buy it. I love these cars. I've probably owned 10 of them at this point. I've never gone into the internals of the engine before, so this car, I learned a lot. I learned a lot on this car. I hope you guys did too. But there's plenty more coming. Ford content, Chevy content, Mercedes, whatever catches my eye. You guys know how I am. So I think that's enough rambling for now. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this. This finance stuff is really interesting to me. I know I've seen a bunch of comments about, hey, you know, how much you think you have invested? Are you gonna make money? So let me know if you guys found this useful. Let me know if you found it interesting. If you enjoyed the series at all, give the video a thumbs up, and let's keep this thing going, man. Let's keep it going. All that's left to do now is wait for the shipper to come get this thing, and yeah, this is the last you're gonna see of the cheap 2003 Cobra that just needed a clutch. I gotta get that on a t-shirt, just needs a clutch. I really gotta get going on my merch. We'll get there.
Well, the trucker just called, the shipping guy just called. He is down the street. So we are in the last cruise in the Cobra. Headed to the other side of the country.
Well, just like that, we got an empty spot in the garage. Man, do we need it. We got cars outside right now. In fact, the latest project for the channel is right behind me. on site, on the property. Been hiding it from you guys. So I hope you guys will join me for that one. Plenty more coming on all this stuff and everything else. As usual, if you guys like the video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already. All that other jazz. I will see you guys in the next one. Catch you later.